Ecclesiastes, the 5th chapter. We're going to start reading in verse number 4, and we'll read to the end of verse number 7. And tonight we're going to be talking about keeping your vow. Keeping your vow. Verse number 4 says, "When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools." Chapter 5. He says, "Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better is it that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin, neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice and destroy the work of thy hands? For in the multitude of dreams and many words there are also divers vanities, but fear thou God." And we're going to talk tonight about keeping your vow, and what Solomon is talking about here is the vow that you make to God. Now, it does not say here, nor does it say anywhere else in the scriptures that it is required of us to make a vow to God. Making a vow to God is a very noble thing, but nowhere does it say that it's a requirement. Now, there are certain requirements that we get from God, but this is not one of those requirements. 63 times in the scriptures we find the word vow or vows. Now, a vow is a solemn promise, usually deliberate and conscious promise, a pledge or commitment, or an earnest declaration. And what we find in the scriptures regarding a vow, especially that vow that's made unto God, it is a binding vow. We know that more so than ever before, people's words, the promises that people make, even vows that a man makes to a woman and a woman makes to a man on their wedding day, they're broken every day. And that's not something that we should be flippant about. We should be serious about the words, the promises, the vows that we make to people. And I remember the statistic when I was a boy and even into my teenage years that even in good Bible-believing, Bible-preaching churches, the divorce rate was about 50%. Now, there's reasons, there's explanations, and for the most part, I was watching a video clip the other day, and this woman was before a judge, and her husband that had filed for divorce was not there, and so the attorney was acting on the behalf, and the judge looked at the lady, and he said to the lady, he said, "So basically what you're saying is that you can't live with each other anymore." I think they call that irreconcilable differences or something like that, right? And people just, we see it more and more, not just in marriage, but we see it in businesses, we see it sometimes we see it in ministries, sometimes we see it in sports, big time in sports today. They used to say your word is your bond, right? I remember hearing that growing up, and that's something that my parents taught me, and I try to pass that on to my children. Matter of fact, it was about 2 weeks ago. I said that to Michaela. I said, "Your word is your bond." And there's a difference between what I'm talking about, a word or something that you commit to, and a vow before God. But they're very similar things, and we need to take a great consideration into the things that we speak, the words that we say to someone regarding a commitment or a promise or a pledge to them. I saw this quote today, and I think it was probably said tongue in cheek, but the statement was this: when I make a vow to God, then I would suggest to you that it's even stronger than a handshake in Texas. The Bible tells us here in the book of Ecclesiastes, we saw it last week in verse number 2 of this same chapter, be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. And we were talking about worship here, but God takes our idle words very seriously. Matter of fact, the Bible says that we'll give an account for every idle word. And if God takes our idle words seriously, and he does, how much more seriously does he take our promises, especially those promises raised to the level of a formal vow? You know, it's one thing to say to God, "I will." It's another thing to say, "I promise," but yet it's another thing to say, "I vow." A lot of times when promises or vows are made to God, they, getting a little bit ahead of myself here, they're made in haste. And I remember there are several times in my early adult life that I got myself into some trouble. And I went to God and I said, "God, if you get me out of trouble, I vow that," and that's foolish. That's very, very foolish. It's not a way to bargain yourself out of trouble. It's not a bargaining chip. But vows often involve a request from God or an offering or sacrifice to God in return for a certain outcome. Let's look at a couple of things here. We'll go back to Ecclesiastes 5 here in just a moment. But let's go to Genesis chapter 28. Back to Genesis 28. We're going to look at several examples here of individuals who made a vow to God, and what was the reason, what was the cause of their vow made to God. Genesis chapter number 28. In verse number 20, in verse number 21, it says, Jacob vowed a vow, saying, "If God be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God." So you can see here that Jacob is offering up a vow to God in response to a certain outcome. If what he says, God shall be my God, the Lord shall be my God, I vow that if he will be with me, if he will keep me, protect me, if he will provide for me, so that he will bring me back to my Father's house in peace. See, there's certain things that he's laid out in his vow, and he kept the vow. So this was a man who offered up a request to God, or an offering in return for a certain outcome. Now let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 1. For those in our Sunday school class, this is familiar. We taught about Hannah a couple of weeks ago, and this is another individual who made a vow to God in return for a certain outcome. Verse number 9 of this chapter, it says, So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh, and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of the Lord, and Hannah, was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow, and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look upon the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but will give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. So she vowed this vow to God. God, if you give me a man-child, if you bless me with a boy, then this is what I will do. Again, a request in return for a certain outcome. Let's go to Numbers chapter 21. Verse number 1. And when King Arad the Canaanite, which dwelt in the south, heard tell that Israel came by the way of the spies, then he fought against Israel and took some of them prisoners. And Israel vowed a vow. So this is not an individual now, this is a nation here. They vowed a vow unto the Lord and said, If thou wilt indeed deliver this people into mine hand, then I will utterly destroy their cities. And the Lord hearkened to the voice of Israel and delivered up the Canaanites, and they utterly destroyed them in their cities. So again, same thing as the other two examples. They offered up to God a sacrifice, or they gave God a request in return for a certain outcome. Now, none of these examples were for personal, selfish reasons. And if we vow a vow before God or unto God, and it's for the sake of personal gain, then it's a selfish vow, right? The end result of our vow should be first and foremost, really only, glory to God, to bring him honor. And we notice, we see each time in all three of these examples that ultimately God got the glory. The Bible tells us to magnify the Lord. Now, we can't make God bigger than what he is already. But when we magnify him, we glorify, we honor him, we do so for the sake of not just him, but for others to see what God has done. Okay? Now there's 4 quick things that I want to bring out regarding our vows and the importance of keeping our vows. Number 1, regarding our vows, they need to be sensible. Okay? They need to be sensible, meaning this. When we make a vow to God, they need to be realistic and practical. All right? So sometimes we ask for, the Bible says, we can ask God. We can give God to our request. I was talking to Michaela last night about something that was going on in her life at work. And I said, she's sitting on the couch and she's worried and she's stressing out. I said, have you prayed? And her answer to me was, not yet. And my response was, why not? Right? Why are you sitting there worrying and stressing out and fretting when you should be praying about it? And I told her, I said, the Bible tells us that God already knows what's on our heart, what we're going to ask for, but he wants us to give him our request anyways. And I can share with you tonight that she prayed about it, and I prayed about it, and her mom probably prayed about it too, and God favorably answered that prayer request. But sometimes we go to God and we say, God, if you will do this, ultimately for your honor and your glory, then I will vow to do this. And the Bible teaches us that it's okay to do that. But it's got to be a sensible thing. It's got to be a sensible vow. You need to think, again, I want to specify here, making a vow to God is not required. But when you do make a vow to God, or when you're thinking about making a vow to God, be sensible about it. Think about the significance of the vow. All right? Think about the significance of the vow. Think of the scope of it, the depth of the vow. You know, a lot of times, when a man and a woman they exchange vows, they briefly will think about the vows that they're going to say. Sometimes people write out the vows and all that, and sometimes they just write them out real quick just for the sake of writing them out, and there's really no thought into putting together the vows. They don't think about the scope of it. That the vows are supposed to last. They're supposed to last a lifetime, right? And if we put that much emphasis on the vows between man and woman, and we're serious about it, how much more should we consider those vows that we make to God? So think about the significance of the vow, the scope of the vow, and here's this too: the strain or the struggle to keep the vow. Sometimes we can in making that vow, we can make it so unrealistic or so insensible that when it comes time to pay God that vow, we struggle to keep it. And looking back at it, we say, well, that didn't make much sense at all. So we need to think about it in great detail and make it a matter of the heart. Sometimes people make a vow based on emotions or feelings. Hey, let me tell you this. When people make a decision such as this, and it's based off of emotions and feelings, it's not from the heart. You know where it's from? It's from the mind. And usually it's the decision in the mind, it's when they are not in a good mindset. No thought or even little thought into making a vow is very foolish. It's very, very foolish. A wise person will think much about the vow that they will make to God. And they will be sensible about it. I know that there's been times when in the ministry that you've heard me say I've been around the ministry for 53 years. I've been involved in ministry for more than 20 years. So I've seen a lot. I've been through a lot. And people will, at times they'll in a sense they'll be urged or almost coerced into making a decision for God, and they say, "Oh, make that vow to God." You better be careful with that. So we got to make sure that our vows that we make unto God are sensible, but they got to be specific. They got to be definitive. It's got to be clear cut, not vague at all. Let's turn to the book of Judges, chapter number 11. Judges chapter number 11. I'm going to start verse number 28, I guess. This is talking about, let me go back here, chapter number 11, make sure I get on the right page here. This is talking about Jephthah. The Bible says in verse number 1 of that chapter, a mighty man of valor. It says here that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, verse number 28, excuse me. Howbeit the king of the children of Ammon hearkened not unto the words of Jephthah, which he sent him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he passed over Gilead and Manasseh, and passed over Mizpah of Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he passed over into the children of Ammon. And Jephthah vowed a vow unto the Lord and said, If thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon into mine hands. Okay, this is a request, right? You see this? We talked about this earlier. For a certain outcome, it says in verse number 31, that it shall be that whosoever, that's blanket, right? Come on, you with me? This is a blanket. This is not a definitive or clear-cut vow at all. He says that whosoever cometh forth out of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it for a burnt offering. Oh, be careful, little mouth, what you say, right? Now this fits right into this category. So Jephthah, verse 32, passed over the children of Ammon to fight against them, and the Lord delivered them into his hands. And he smote them. And dropped down to the end of verse number 33. Thus the children of Ammon were subdued before the children of Israel. When Jephthah came to Mizpah to his house, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with timbrels and with dances, and she was his only child. Beside her he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to pass, when he saw her, that he rent his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, thou hast brought me very low, and thou art one of them that trouble me, for I have opened my mouth unto the Lord, and I cannot go back. You see the seriousness of this? This is a very serious matter, and we'll talk about the seriousness here just in a few minutes. But he was not specific. Was it a noble vow? Oh, yes. It was a noble vow. Was it foolish? Yes. And she said, My father, if thou hast opened thy mouth unto the Lord, do to me according to that which hath proceeded out of my mouth. So this is a very wise daughter. She said, Father, if this is what you vowed to God, if this is what you promised, it doesn't make a difference what will happen to me. You keep your word to God. And in your own time, you can read the rest of that chapter. But if a vow is made, make it not difficult to keep. So that means you got to be specific. Make it, if it needs to be simple, make it simple. Right? Come on. Make it simple. Be very specific in that. Because unspecific vows could lead to heartache, sorrow, and regret. Although, again, as noble as could be, he needed to be specific concerning his vow that he made to God. Then we see that we need to be serious. A flippant vow could have undesirable consequences. Now, I don't think Jephthah here was flippant in his heart. I don't think he was flippant in his mind or his attitude or his spirit. I think it was very noble. But because he was not specific, when it came time to see who that sacrifice would be, there was a little bit inside of him that maybe it's not that serious. But the daughter said, it is that serious. A vow should never, and I emphasize never, all caps, never be made lightly or quickly. A vow may be easily spoken or quickly expressed, but could take a lifetime to fulfill it. You know, the typical vow between a man and a woman when they get married, part of it, I'll honor you, I'll respect you, I'll do this, I'll do that, for better, for worse, right? For richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. And sometimes it takes a lifetime to get to that. Especially maybe the sickness part. Hey, the vow is for better or for worse. Correct? The good times, the bad times, whether we're rich, whether we're poor, whether we're in good health or whether we're in bad health. And the vows that we make to God should be taken more seriously than those vows. So we need to consider the vow, consider the depth of the vow, consider the dedication necessary to keep that vow. When we think of the seriousness of it, what you give concerning that vow, and this is not your word only, but what you give and what you will give up to keep that vow. So we must be serious when it comes to our vows unto the Lord. And then we need to be sure to keep it. Let's go back to our chapter in Ecclesiastes. Let's look at verse number 4. It says, when thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it. That means don't delay in your payments, right? When I was a young man, as a single young man, and then as a married young man, financially speaking, I got it over my head, you know. I drowned, Miss Lois, I drowned in finances. You know, I lived beyond my means. You've heard that terminology, right? And then I had to rob Peter to pay Paul. And then it finally got to the point where, oh, it won't hurt to miss this payment. You been there? I'm glad you haven't, Ms. Lois, because I'm telling you, it's miserable. And then missed one payment, then it comes to two missed payments, and, you know, but you know what? They'll always come after their money. Will they not? They will always come after what is owed them. And let me tell you this, if you don't pay God your vow, he'll come after it. And you don't want God to come after you so you can pay your vow. Don't defer, it says, to pay your vow. But what if, Brother JD, what if a preacher, I made this vow 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and the time to pay it has come and gone? Well, it is a sin, right? Acknowledge your sin, confess your sin. He is faithful and just to forgive your sin. Amen? Right? So I told somebody not too long ago, they were telling me about something that they did years back, and I said, well, if you haven't, acknowledge it to God, confess it, and he'll forgive it. It's a done deal. And aren't you glad we have forgiveness of sins, past, present, future? Right? He'll forgive that sin. But we need to make sure that we understand that if we don't keep that vow, it is a sin. Look at this in verse number 5. Better it is it that thou shouldest not vow than thou shouldest vow and not pay? Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. So it's a sin not to pay a vow that you make unto God. Don't make excuses. Don't procrastinate. Don't defer to pay it. Pay it when it's due. Pay that which has been vowed. This is something that Solomon also said. He said this to his son in Proverbs chapter 20. I'll just read it to you. You don't have to turn there. Proverbs chapter 20, in verse number 25. It is a snare to the man who devoureth that which is holy, and after vows to make inquiry. What does that mean? It means that you're trying to get out of it, to make excuses, to seek ways to escape it. I had a man come to me one time, and he had promised, given his word, made a promise to the church. And he came to me and says, will you absolve me of my commitment? I'm not God, right? So I said, okay. But let me tell you this, you can never go to God and say, God, will you absolve me of my vow? And God said, okay. No, you're required to pay it. So that's why you need to be sure of it. You need to be specific. You need to be serious-minded about it. So you can be sure to keep your vow, because God requires payment. Not keeping a vow made to God not only dishonors and discredits the person, but it also dishonors and disrespects God. And none of us want to disrespect God. So make sure that you keep your vow. I thought of this, not keeping a vow made to God is an act of perjury. For whatever reason. You perjure yourself. Because you've made a vow, and basically what you've done is you've committed an act of deception and dishonesty. It's a serious thing. So we need to make sure that we're keeping our vow that we've made unto God. So we need to be sensible, we need to be specific, we need to be serious, and we need to be sure to keep our vow that we've made.